Welcome back to another episode of Rebuilding the Palisades podcast, hosted by DSI. Today we have Josh and Clay, founders and principals of AB Design Studio. Thank you both very much for coming in and have the conversation with us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit. Let's start with you, Josh. How did you initially get into architecture?
Start off with the easy questions, huh? Let's see. Well, I was one of those kids that grew up with kind of an artistic ability. High schools in the 80s in Southern California, they'd have an art classroom, they'd have a photography classroom, they'd have auto shop, wood shop, and it's interesting to me because if you're artistically inclined, that's a fraction of the curriculum that's available. So I had an art teacher that took a shine to me. She gave me like 2 periods of art in the morning, and really encouraged me. And I think as I got into college and started looking at the opportunities, it kind of struck me that that's what I always wanted to do. Not sure where that moment was. But when I walked into an architecture school and saw what was happening there, it was an immediate connection for me. I knew that this is what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. And that, kind of interesting to talk about that in terms of what Clay and I have created together, because we both had experiences in an architecture studio in a college. And when we came together to build our own firm, those conversations were very primary to what we were creating. And that's why the name of our firm is what it is. AB Design Studio is for us a manifestation of what started in the studios in college. So having that studio experience and learning what studio means was really significant for he and I. And when we sought out to build our own firm, we wanted to make sure it operated like a studio, which is kind of a distinction. But I think anybody who's in a creative environment, working around creative arts or creative businesses, understands the studio like we're in today. It's a place to make things.
Sure.
Creating.
Sure. Very cool. Very cool. Clay, how about you?
Growing up, my father was a contractor, and I would spend summers with him working and mostly laboring, but working on job sites,
digging holes,
carrying sheets of things.
And at some point, we were in his office, and I was looking at some plans of a house that we were going to go visit. I think I was maybe 12, and I just was thumbing through the plans and just kind of looking at them. And when we got to the house was in rough framing. But I walked around the house and I knew where the kitchen was, I knew where the bathroom was, and I just it was just all automatic for me. It was, I like to say I was thinking in 3D at that point. And then later in high school, I was also very involved in art classes and making things and very much a tinkerer. And so when I was looking for schools, I was either looking down the engineering path or the architecture path. And I had a chance to intern with an engineering firm one summer before my senior year. And that's when I decided to be an architect because I didn't want to be an engineer.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And then the collaboration, how did the collaboration ultimately end up happening?
We met each other in Santa Barbara working for different architecture firms. And then at one point we started working together at one of them. And we just became friends. And after a few years of working together, I went out on my own to start my own business, and a couple years later, he decided to join me, and that's 20 years now.
Wow.
We've been working together and collaborating and building our studio.
Super cool.
And our team. Yeah.
Super cool. Well, it's definitely evolved into a thing. You guys have got a really, really cool thing going on. That studio is a neat place to visit. And so far been an awesome place to collaborate. So Clay, you've been described as, an ultimate strategist. How do you integrate roles like, developer, planner, real estate professional, et cetera, into your architectural projects?
Well, I think early on in my career, I spent a lot of time working with different people in those professions, developers, real estate agents. Did a lot of developer-based projects and work. Got to spend time with some people that, not just have a meeting and leave, but spend days with people on trips and things. And, so I'm always really paying attention to, from a strategy standpoint, like what's the best solution here? Not just solving a design problem, but there's the design aspect of it. And then you start talking about pro formas and ROI and things that, developers and hoteliers are looking at. And, you start speaking with them in those terms and start making decisions that have a positive impact on the bottom line, right? Like the projects have to be successful. Residential single-family homes are a different type of project, and they have more personal. It's more personal for people, and they're awesome projects just in the same. But it's helpful to be able to strategize with a client on a hotel or a restaurant or a multifamily structure. How many keys and how many doors and how many, what can we fit and what does the zoning allow for? And those are the areas that I'd like to spend time in and really bring into the conversation rather than just focusing on the floor plan or the elevation or the design overall.
Yeah.
It's actually it's actually an important question that gives us an opportunity to share something that I think can get overlooked. Is that when you're taking on, say, a residential project, people are coming to us with a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of bases to cover. And it's not clear to me that in our culture people understand the role of the architect. Like, what are we supposed to provide to that? And I think if you go from firm to firm, architect to architect, you're going to see differences in terms of their willingness to get involved at different levels, right? Like here we are today. We're not in our studio. We're in this podcast, right? Like that's giving away time from one thing to do something else. And if you've tracked us throughout the month and look at all the different things we're doing to facilitate not only our studio, facilitate each other to kind of keep growing and so forth, but also to get these projects off the ground, it's more than what I think people understand typically the role or the typical role that the architect takes. I think Clay really takes on the idea of really being somebody's, I call him the ultimate consultant, because he's interested, and I think we both are, but him especially in the areas that he's focused, is really wrapping himself around somebody's opportunity and offering himself in multiple levels, not just as the architect, somebody to bounce ideas off of, somebody to track down and understand what the current code opportunities are or legislation that's coming down from the state or the federal level that actually creates advantage for the project. We could spend a whole podcast talking about all the different aspects that an architect can actually provide to a project if that's what they want to involve themselves in. For us, oddly enough, it seems like everything. What they're bringing to the table in terms of here's what I've got, here's what I need. There's some obvious things that we can do. We can do some design work. We can draw up plans. We can get you permits. We can get a budget for you, and help you manage your contractor. But there's a lot more that goes on in taking on a project like building a house from scratch, or as what we're seeing quite a lot of right now, resurrecting a house from a catastrophe, fire, flood, and that there's a lot going on for people in those circumstances. So they need more than just an architect.
Yeah, I mean, they need emotional support.
And they need a strategist to point the way. See the path. I'm curious about what comes of this in our community with so much construction in front of it and so many different people who represent such a broad spectrum of home builders, right? It's certainly one thing to have somebody who's decided that they want to tear down their house and rebuild it, who's excited about that or plan for that, come to you and they say, this is what we want to do. That's a certain profile of a human or persona. And then there's the person that never wanted that, like the house they were in, and now they have to go through this. And there's a lot of that's going on, and it's going to be going on. And it's interesting to me to contemplate what they're going to bring to the table in terms of available solutions, right? And they're not, potentially a lot of people out there are not looking to make an architectural statement or design statement, just want their home back, want their family to be whole again, right? Yep. And they're having to do this obviously under, or in the wake of real trauma.
Most all these people didn't start January 1st thinking that they're going to build a home this year or next year.
That's right.
And now there's tens of thousands of people that are in that position.
Yeah, all lined up.
Clients show up to us and they're like, like going to the doctor, like, right? Well, how's this going to work? Right. What are you going to do to me?
Yeah. How much is this going to cost?
Hell yeah. And, and of course, same with their builders. And, maybe they've had somebody come in and do a new roof for them. Maybe they've had someone, install a pool. I think in a certain sense, homeowners are pretty accustomed to having a handyman or a contractor of some sort do something for them. And I think they can kind of visualize that, because it's tangible. You see, like, paying to have something built. But when they have to start to contemplate permitting, like how many people have gone and got a permit for anything in their life, right?
That's a whole other situation to deal with.
And a lot of permits and a lot of approvals. And then, I need to hire a soils engineer and a civil engineer and a structural engineer and an electrical engineer. And I need to do the interiors and I got to buy furniture and I've got to, and this architect guy or gal that's like talking to me about all that, and I think that's where our minds have been. This is what we've been talking about in our studio and trying to influence our staff around, is like really starting to tune into that reality. And then, like we were talking about before, like what do we provide to that situation? Like obviously we can design a house and draw it up.
Get a permit. And
we can also, do things to kind of manage a budget. Like we've unfortunately, having been in Southern California practicing for 25, 27, 28 years. And being in Santa Barbara, we've been through a few fires. And in Santa Barbara, we had debris flows and floods. So we've gotten to know the process of how to now we can add to our strategic consulting, how to help navigate a family through an insurance claim. I mean, really difficult process for everybody. How does the architect show up to that? And I think the way we look at ourselves is like, and I think this is kind of where architects are going in the future, is like, or I think it's different than certainly it looked when I first started, is we're becoming facilitators of expertise. Mm-hmm. And an architect is kind of at the center of a network of experts, and the complexity of what we have to do today, like sustainability just adds another level of complexity to building a home. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know about you, but he and I live in old homes that were remodeled, but they were old 1960s architecture or construction, right? Like, I open up my walls and I was like, oh, there's no insulation here. It's all old growth, 2x4s, Doug fir, tight grain, that kind of stuff we use for cabinetry now, like really beautiful wood. It's all buried in there, and it's so simple. And silly little aluminum windows. But, we've got, the California Building Code and the Green Building Code is significant measures in there that have to be met that almost make, everything sustainable at this point, at least meet the measures of typical, green building practices.
Energy efficiency and
like every home in California now is required to have solar panels if it's new.
Like when we start a project, empty site, one of the things that we like to do, going back a little bit to the environmental design part and touching back on sustainability, is we study, the sun and the wind and where all these environmental impacts show up and try to design around that so that we're, heating the building with the sun as much as possible, or having enough daylighting in the building so you're not turning the lights on all day and stuff like that. When we have those opportunities, it's great. And that's another way to be sustainable. But a lot of what we're talking about with these with the Palisades is there's a lot of neighborhoods that, they're just small little lots and tight little homes on them.
Right.
And it makes it more challenging to think from the environmental standpoint on it. But yeah, there's a lot that we have to facilitate when we're taking somebody through that process.
Yeah.
You're
Without doubt.
daunting.
Yeah, indeed.
Discover why we're the most awarded home technology firm in the U.S. Our design-centric approach transforms your space with effortless control of lighting, motorized shades, audio, video, and more. Our friendly experts guide you every step of the way, no tech speak, just smart, stunning simplicity. We provide years of care from our award-winning service and support team. Experience technology that feels as good as it looks.
Shifting gears a little bit back to kind of the body of work that the studio has done over the years. Is there a particular project that stands out?
Well, the truth is we're always really most excited about what we're doing next.
What you're doing next, yeah.
Kind of
Got
addicted
it.
to that,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah, sure. I can relate.
Or what we're doing right now.
Never satisfied what we've done. It takes a few years, right?
Right.
I often I was spending time yesterday with another architect, and he was showing me a project he did, and we were standing out the street, and he's like, "Oh, that's wrong, and that didn't do that right," and he's like, "I don't like it. I hate this building now." And it's like, and we all joke about that because it's like it's kind of how it goes. And then I said to him like, "Come back in a year, you'll love it."
Yeah.
And that's because all that control that you're trying to exert will be out
But
of your
still
mind.
new,
And you'll see
right?
it, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, for me, there's lots of nice design work we've done for people. To me, the thing that makes it special or memorable is when it really connects with people in a way that kind of reverberates back to the initial intent. Like one of the projects that Clay and I've done a few of is childcare centers, and kind of just got pulled into it at one point in our career, and they're a total pain in the ass to design and build because they're
challenging
They got to be
projects.
perfect.
Yeah.
For early childhood development, first 5, kids got to come out better than worse. There can't be anything in that environment that's a detriment to their development.
Sure.
And there's people hovering over that, and it's very, it's very carefully done. It's hard to do. But you come back to one of those places when it's full of kids and they're out playing and they're racing around doing their thing, and you look and you go, I made this. Like, wow. Like this kid's, that's his preschool. That's his, that's his childhood right there, happening right in front of me.
Yeah.
And we got to be the ones that make this. And it's not about anybody knowing that. It's just having that experience of being able to sit with that. We did an exploratory museum in Santa Barbara that, like, every time I go there, I'm just like mind blown watching what's happening inside of it. I don't care about the building. It's just the activity.
You're connected to
It's
that.
rewarding.
What it does.
Yeah.
It's doing its job.
100%.
I mean, the Moxie Museum he's speaking of had the millionth visitor or something recently. Like 1 million people have gone through that building.
I think when it comes to
It's pretty
residential,
cool.
though, I think where he and I have pulled that into the discussion, it's easy in commercial architecture because they always come in with a program. We need 16, hotel rooms, or we need an office space that can do this, or a warehouse. Like we did a really interesting project. We've been working with the Food Bank of Santa Barbara, which they have a massive logistical issue that they have to solve from getting food stored and distributed. And we learned a lot about things we never imagined we'd learn about. And you can make the correlation, like if you're successful or not. You go talk to the guy that's working the warehouse, like, did we do this right, or did we make this more difficult for you? And they tell you, like, we're loading food, at 30% faster than before. Like they have all their numbers, and okay, cool, we did it. You can bring that, I think, back to residential design when you start to think about a family, not like a business, but it's a unit, and you've got different personalities in it, right? You got, and you kind of have I think in our mind, like a requirement to make sure that they're thriving. Like, yes, I want to design something that's interesting. Yes, I want to design something that's materially satisfying, beautiful, authentic, like that quote you read. But ultimately, you got to think about that there's a child growing up in that house, right? Potentially. Like, where are they doing their homework? Did we create the correct space for that? there's a family dynamic that needs to function. Does the house pull for that? Does it actually pull for their success as a family and as an individual? Does it create like an environment that is going to have them be functional and successful in life? Like, we have a very unique scenario here where there's very little to take advantage of it, but what little there is, we need to take full advantage of it. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to bring people back, and we're not going to make them whole.
Yeah.
And it's a responsibility that I think, we're all trying to grapple with, and you just want to help.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you? And it does feel like sometimes we're overstepping our boundaries or taking on more than what we should, but it also feels like kind of the right natural thing to do when you see what's happened and and how incredible the need is.
Yeah.
So
So,
but again, there's a lot of really great people in this community that
For
can
sure.
actually pull this off, and I think their eyes are open and their heads are up, and they're looking at this. And the conversations we're having with our colleagues and our peers, it's like it's very it's a very serious commitment that I'm hearing from people around this. And an understanding that there's people leaning on us right now to make something happen that doesn't have a guarantee behind it at the moment.
No, they don't have anywhere else to turn. We're the design build community. There are a lot of people relying on us being there, having the expertise, knowing what to do, guiding them in the right direction. I wanted to ask you both, what were your initial thoughts, when you saw the news and there was a fire? There was some initial reaction, of course, that I'm sure developed a bit as time went on and we all realized how big the fire actually was. I saw the smoke, right? I saw the smoke one morning in Altadena, and I remember looking at it and thinking, that is a giant fire, absolutely massive fire over there. And then I went and clicked on the news, and it was, several hundred acres, and then just a few minutes later, it's X thousands of acres, and the next thing I know is 10,000 acres. I was blown away. What were some of your initial reactions when you realized how big these fires really were?
Well, for me, it's just the tragedy of it is the first thing I think that I felt was just, this is horrific.
Yeah.
And the scale of it was the part that I found incredible. Just how many structures and buildings and people, and then people's lives that were impacted. I got the opportunity to drive through the Palisades probably a couple weeks after, maybe 3-4 weeks after. And one of the things that struck me kind of then looking at it was then all the businesses that are empty, right? The cafes that are closed, and then the people that work there, where did they go? What happened to the employees that are now not working in that business because it's not open? So there's like these different layers of the economic kind of challenges that showed up in this fire, different than some of the other fires that I've seen in Santa Barbara and other places. And just the scale of it was just unbelievable. And then, naturally right now, as we've been talking, it's, like Josh said, the conversations we're having is how do we help? How do we help? And then how do we build back better? Because most of those homes in Altadena, in Palisades, were, 40s, 50s, 60s eras, probably. Maybe some older homes, maybe some newer homes that were, rebuilt recently. But, you don't want to put back the same thing. And we need to build back more resilient. And we need to build back with better ideas on how to deal with flying embers.
For sure.
Right? Like just that one piece. If we can solve that problem
Right.
collectively as architects and builders and engineers and whoever, that's what we need to be looking at. And whether that's a material thing, a detail thing, just an approach, it's all of it. You have to look at every bit of it and then think through the problem long enough to come up with better solutions.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not lost on us that's like to put upon somebody who's gone through this personally, this, call to action to build back better, right? When they just want their life back,
Right.
right? Like, how do you have that conversation sensitively with respect? And it probably needs to be said and done too. What concerns me is looking at because I've seen this repeatedly throughout these different fires we've had. I mean, when I saw the fire, it was kind of a familiar thing to see. Given living in Santa Barbara, we've had, we're counting up the number of fires we've had since I've been up there about 30 years, and it's significant. And then the debris flows that come after them, which sometimes can be even worse. But the first thing I thought is I hope they can get everybody out of the way, because these hillsides are just knitted in there, and it's a lot of people trying to get out of there. And if you've never seen a lot of people trying to get out of a neighborhood like that, it's terrifying. And we all saw that. Look, the folks that were involved in first responders and the community did a good job of getting out of the way, which is impressive because it was a lot to get out of the way of. Now, what concerns me though is and I've seen this in Santa Barbara and I've seen this in other communities, is the agencies come back, the building department, and they want to help, they want to be helpful, and they want to get out of the way of these people's ability to rebuild, and they start offering concessions to the process. They say things like, we're going to, and what's typical is, we'll give you a permit to build tomorrow, so to speak, or whatever. Tomorrow is usually not tomorrow, but we'll give you a permit and expedite it. Just build back what you had, and we'll give you a 10% fudge factor. You can build it 10% bigger, whatever. As long as it's the same thing, same place, same kind of whatever, you're good. And I think that sets a tone that's kind of in opposition to what Clay's talking about, because building back better requires that you'd actually sit down and think about what's appropriate to build there, not put some box on top of somebody's property day one and say, well, as long as you build it now, I'll give you a permit and save you 3 months. For a house that needs to last more than 100 years, right?
Sure.
Because if you want it to be sustainable, it's not build it for 50 years. It's build it to last and build it to be resilient. We know you get all our engineers and designers together, landscape architects, Firewise construction, Firewise landscape, creating protective buffers, clearing brush. There's a lot of well-established principles that can be followed that will probably become more salient to people now that this happened. It's beyond our minds, right? Like in Santa Barbara, we're pretty keyed up on floods now. Like it was 60, 70 years ago before, that exited the community consciousness, because there's nobody left that remembered it.
Right.
But we have a big problem with that. And now, the policies and the designers are really thinking carefully, and the homeowners are thinking more carefully because they have a new respect for it. So I think Firewise construction, thinking more carefully about what it's like to live in the urban wildlife interface, and then thinking about resiliency and those things. I don't think it's going to be hard to pitch people or sell people on the value of that. But what I don't want to see is people being curtailed and kind of bamboozled into, I'll give you this permit if you keep it kind of simple, because it's insidious, because when you're
oversimplifying.
And you're putting that in front of somebody who's in a very vulnerable position. We'll get it built. Don't worry about this expediting that they're offering. We're going to get you a permit. We're going to build something that's valuable to you. And I think that's where I want to make sure we focus on this discussion, because some of this is kind of a buzzkill to talk about, right? And it's all kind of like problems and do we have solutions? But there is something that we can do. Is when we do get to build somebody's home back, and we kind of talked about this early on, is we get to invest ourselves and get involved with people and kind of create something awesome for them. And you asked like memorable projects that we've had. Like some of them has been rebuilding after fires. Like we did a project with a family where the father had been lost tragically in an unexpected death, left a wife and 2 kids, young kids, and they were kind of in the process of saving their money to design and remodel their home. They came to us, the woman who owned the house came to us in the wake of this, after she'd kind of recovered some, insurance and all that, said, hey, my husband and I were going to build this house. He's gone, but I still want to do it. And I want you guys to do it with me. And, here's what I want. And we had these, we were present to the kids. And we did an interesting design where they were actually able to bring their parents into and have like a multi-generational living thing that made it more affordable. And the whole process of doing that was like being a participant and getting this family back in some form where they actually got to be productive again. And I'm for sure clear that the two kids got to watch this and watch their mother lead this process. And I know that I have to imagine that left them with an understanding of what it takes to get through this life, is that things happen that are terrible.
Yep.
And there's what you're doing about it and what you're not doing about it. And being able to be an advocate for them or assist their mother in actually putting that back together. I know it made a mark in a positive way, and it showed them that this is possible. And yeah, you have some real trauma and tragedy there. You're not going to get back certain things. People are gone. But there is a tomorrow, and you can be a part of the design of that tomorrow, and you can have it work for you and others. And to me, that's like, if there's the how we do it and what we do, then there's the why we do it. For me, I think for Clay and I, that's, you just can't put a price tag on it. That it's like we're kind of lucky to have this kind of a job, because we get to actually participate in that. But I'd say, like, I'd like to be a fireman sometimes, because I can save you today, and it's like kind of happens in a 20,
Yeah.
like these things take us a couple of years to do. So the delay of gratification can be years, but once you've done this long enough and it kind of builds up behind you, you get to carry that around. And I'm looking forward to meeting more people that we can help, and I'm looking forward to watching people step up and reclaim their future.
Yeah,
because I know
for sure.
and I know that's a process too.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, guys. Clay, is there anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation? Is there a resource or anything that you might be able to direct to, a homeowner that might be watching, to kind of help them through any advice or guidance you might want to offer?
We've talked about a lot of different things here. I think for me, being able to help people, as Josh was saying, is really important. And I think, as architects, we're not just drawing floor plans. We're really facilitating the process and the effort of rebuilding. We have a wealth of information and experience to bring to this and help people out and connect the dots with people. And I think the biggest issue is always insurance, and how do you navigate that? And there's lots of,
So tough right now.
there's lots of different methodologies out there, that people can look at, and there's such a wide spectrum of where people are on that, no insurance to great insurance and everything in between. And just really getting help with that is important for people, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I would say most Southern California architects who've been practicing the last 20 years have some level of experience, some more than others, really understanding how they can help a client navigate those claims and maximize them, right? And get exact, because what Clay's talking about is important. Like, if we can, if you're underinsured, then what?
yeah,
If you're underfunded, then what, right? And there's things we can do to potentially try to bring the cost of construction down, but that's probably not going to be the biggest lever. Biggest lever is getting coverage if we can, and there's some
Code upgrades are a big one.
because when you take a house that's built in the 60s and say I want to, you get typically you get the insurance to cover the cost of what was there, but then building back, or like you said, building back better, is built into that equation, because the building code has changed so much. Like, the requirement to build a house right now far exceeds. I mean, it's
very,
not even,
very
not
different.
even on the same spectrum.
Very different.
And so being able to account for all that, so you can go to your insurance company and say, look, this is because the code upgrade's kind of sometimes gray area. It's like how you can fill that bucket. Obviously a lot of insurance companies or insurance policies have limits, but there's a bucket there you got to fill totally, and you got to make a very clear, cited argument to the insurance adjuster and their kind of back checking process to justify and legitimize that. And a good architect and builder sitting together with an owner, we can see into that. And like I said before about solar panels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some people have them, some don't, but it's a new requirement of the code. So if you didn't have them, you have to have them. And again, there's money for that. It has to be provided. So I don't know. I mean, it goes on and on, but yeah, working with owners to recover that or to navigate that insurance policies.
Important.
Yeah.
It's an important piece.
Yeah, without doubt. Because not everybody has, deep pockets to just fork out and just rebuild again.
That's right.
And even some of the wealthier folks that, we may have done projects with over the years, in some of these neighborhoods, Malibu and Palisades, they may live in a big, really nice luxury home, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily have that, 20 million or whatever it costs to just rebuild.
Right.
Liquid just sitting there, so it's a challenge. We've got, probably a decade or so ahead of us of hard work to do. But we're here for it. Happy to hear that you guys are here for it as well. And, I want to thank you again for coming in and being a guest, and look forward to doing more projects together. We've got a few that we're collaborating on now, and looking forward to wrapping those up and doing more good work in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. And
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for, putting yourself out there for this. And,
Happy to do it.
I think it's a good medium to, people need information. So I know the other people you're talking to, and I think it's going to be an important resource for folks. So yeah,
Fantastic.
Good on you.
Yep.
Thank you very
Great job.
much. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Thanks.